Gillian Lowndes, divorce attorney and family law specialist, says a complete overhaul of the matrimonial property system in South Africa is needed to ensure an equitable distribution of awards to parties in a divorce. Her argument is based on years of experience in this field. She says usually in the event of divorce, the financially stronger party is the stronger negotiator and the party who wields the most power. But that position does not necessarily lead to justice. Well, to discuss further, she's here with me in studio. Welcome. Great to have you with us. Let's begin with some background information just to unpack your argument that the stronger party, financially stronger party, is in a better position to negotiate. Does the law not take into account circumstantial evidence?
On the face of it, yes, it does. You can, in a litigious environment, approach the courts in terms of the rules and ask for a contribution towards your costs. Now, you must understand litigation is costly. If you've got an attorney on your side who's a senior attorney, they're charging a certain rate per hour, and before you know it, you've spent 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 rand, and you haven't even reached trial yet. So you go along to the courts and you say, here I am, I'm a housewife, or I'm a house husband. You know, that doesn't happen as often, and I need some money to litigate. And the court says, here's 15,000 rand, or 20,000 rand. Or if you're lucky, between 50 and 80,000
And
rand.
if you run out of money?
And if you run out of money, you go along again. Your chances of being knocked back are quite good. The court may well say, no, I'm not giving you any more, or give you a smaller payout again. Whereas your spouse, who's earning, who has assets to liquidate, to fund his litigation, is spending 100,000 rand a month on his litigation. He's got this team, and your attorney's scrabbling around. And you know from experience, where you've got somebody who doesn't have money, it's almost impossible to perform the task properly for them. Because where you need to go to court and bring an application, you don't, because you know they can't afford it. So you try and do it by correspondence, you sit with your colleague, you try and negotiate.
Or you get a pro bono attorney to represent you.
And you know, let's face it, if anybody has been to a pro bono attorney, they are overworked, they're underpaid, they have too many clients, they have desperate people coming to see them every day. They don't have the luxury of taking on a certain number of clients, with secretaries and candidate attorneys and assistants and that whole infrastructure behind them to assist them in performing the task properly. You know, I take my hat off to pro bono lawyers. I really, really do. But factually, they just cannot render the same service.
Divorce can be quite tricky. Lots of emotions involved as well. And very difficult to get around the facts because there are only two parties to a marriage and only two parties who knows exactly what went wrong.
You know, so true. That's such a true statement. And if you unpack that, so people come along, the marriage is now ended. Maybe somebody's had an affair, maybe they've just grown tired of one another, they've grown apart, and they now want to get divorced. Generally, one party has more money than the other. And I find, you know, there was love. At the beginning, they loved each other. There was a great relationship. There were roses and champagne, and they went away on these wonderful weekends. They then got a house and a bond and a dog and children and expensive cars. The husband carried on working. Generally, that's what the statistics still tell us, because the woman has had the children, she's born the children. Genetically, again, she's more inclined to be or play the nurturing role. And psychologists are starting to say that actually women are better equipped to play the nurturing role, and you fall into those gender-specific roles. Husband carries on working. Wife may have worked, but she now gives up and she looks after the children. She may go back to work. Again, the statistics tell us she's not going to, her career isn't going to take off as his does, because she's got that ball and chain, for want of a better word. She's got to look after the children, the home, the domestic duties. There is an uneven balance of that duty in the home. So she now sits with a divorce on her hands. Maybe she's the protagonist. And he's got all the money to litigate, and he's got all the power. Even if they sit in a room and they now decide to mediate, the courts are pushing us towards mediation. I'm a qualified mediator. I have done mediations. You sit with a guy who's got the money and the assets, and very few people want to give that away. They've worked hard. The courts say to them a clean break principle is the best. You need to unshackle yourselves from one another, and you need to carry on with your lives. You're married in a certain way. I don't know whether you want to get into that, but it's fairly simple. You're either in community, let's share everything, assets and liabilities, debts as well. You are out of community of property, off you go. You don't
so those
share
are the
assets.
two matrimonial property
And then
systems.
you've got the ANC with accrual.
Yeah.
Most people sign an ANC and they include the accrual system. And what it says essentially is everything you make from the day you get married until the day you divorce, you share. On paper, that sounds about right. But people don't want to share. At the end of a marriage, they feel aggrieved. They probably think they hate one another.
So the whole issue around equity that you have with the current matrimonial property system is when they do not want to abide by what the law says. That is, if they're married in accrual.
Or what they've done is they've put in a huge, what's known as a commencement value at the start of the marriage. Say the husband comes in with assets. Say he's worth 10 million rand. Let's take a figure. That then increases at the CPI every year. So over the duration of the marriage, he has to make more than 10 million rand plus CPI. Otherwise, there's nothing to share because his commencement value gets subtracted from whatever he's made.
So let me play devil's advocate with you. Let's say you entered into an antenuptial contract prior to entering into a valid marriage. You are the breadwinner.
Right.
You are financially responsible for your spouse. Your spouse has an affair. Would it not be natural to lash out emotionally and to say, why would I want to contribute to your lifestyle after you are the cause of the breakdown of this marriage?
So South African law says, doesn't matter. We've got a no-fault-based divorce system. Sounds lovely on paper, it really does. But of course, emotionally...
But he fights this now on that basis.
Well, the courts have said it doesn't matter.
And he has rights.
The court says he doesn't. It doesn't matter. She could have had 10 affairs. The only aspect of the divorce that affects
What
is
rights does she
maintenance.
have to claim maintenance? What are the usual arguments you would put forward for the weaker spouse in this instance?
Right. So maintenance is such an interesting topic, and it's a very wide topic. And there are all sorts of things that get taken into account. The age of the parties, the standard of living, conduct of the parties. It's the only area where conduct comes into play. The standard of living, etc. So here, perhaps she's 50. She's had an affair, but the court says, in terms of your matrimonial property distribution, you're entitled to a share in the accrual. The fact that you had an affair, or 10 or 20, doesn't matter.
If there was no accrual.
So there's no accrual, there's no money to be had. All she has now is a maintenance claim.
Okay.
She stayed at home, she's cared for the children, she's contributed to his ability to be successful. All of that the court will
And
look
that
at.
counts for something.
It counts. It counts. But she finds herself in an interesting situation. Perhaps she has a degree. Perhaps she worked many years ago. The court says, I now need to balance the clean break, the unshackling, versus your ability to maintain yourself. You're 50. You're not 65 or 70.
But you're not a spring chicken either.
You're not a spring chicken, and you're not getting assets. So they also take that into account. But generally, she's not going to get maintenance for life. Generally, the court is not going to say that he has to maintain her for life. You very seldom see that kind of award unless it's a situation where the woman has never worked, has no degrees, has absolutely no prospect of being able to enter the job market, and is of a certain age. Say she's at retirement age, she's not going to get a job. Then you might see a maintenance award. But generally the
But not
courts,
for life.
She might get for life. But our 50-year-old, probably not.
Is that equitable from your
you know,
perspective,
from my
given the
perspective,
circumstances
no.
and from the perspective of the law?
No. You know, I act for men and women, and here we're having a discussion which will centre around women because of the topic and because of the division of power and the division of gender-specific duties culturally across the continents. So I see this happening again and again, where these women come to me and they say, you know, okay, so I'm going to get some assets. Perhaps in later life the man has not done as well as he hoped he would. The asset share isn't going to be that great. She now has a maintenance claim. In many instances, her husband's earning, and his earnings are increasing, and he has the ability to maintain himself at a higher level until his death. But she's got no automatic right to that earning power that she's helped him develop. She has a maintenance claim. And all of the factors in the Maintenance Act and the Divorce Act have to be unpacked and looked at before she will be told by the court what she can get her hands on in terms of maintenance, and generally she will not get a claim for life. She will not be paid maintenance for life. And there's the converse to that argument. Why should he support her for the rest of her life? He will be saying, I want to divorce you. Maybe you've had an affair.
I want to move on.
I want to move on. I don't want to be supporting some other person for the rest of my life. I'm happy to support our children if they're not self-supporting yet.
And that might be a fair argument also if the tables are turned and the wife is the breadwinner and the man is dependent on her.
Absolutely, yes. It works both ways, but it can lead to unfairness. And in England and Wales, the courts have a very wide discretion. They apply equity. There is no marital property regime. They look at the assets in the marriage, they look at the earning power, and they come to an equitable arrangement, an equitable decision.
Regardless of whatever you choose to enter into before you contract the marriage. No contract.
Now they're starting to look at what they call the prenuptial contract. They're starting, but in very, very limited marriages. Generally, there are no contracts. The court will decide what's fair and reasonable.
So given the divorce rate, litigation could be quite a lucrative business in those areas.
Litigation in divorces is a lucrative business. Do you know what I think, though? And this hasn't yet been touted it has been discussed. I think when parties make a decision to divorce, they should be told to sit on their hands for a year. Wait. If you want to separate, there should be some kind of an interim arrangement where you separate. And there need to be interim arrangements pertaining to the children. But just wait until the emotions subside. Then sit down around a table and see what you can do.
Question is, why should anyone get married? Just kidding.
Let's not go there. Yeah. Now that's a wide topic.
Last question for you. What are your proposals to overhaul the current matrimonial property systems? What, in your view, would be a more equitable system to have in place in South Africa?
An equitable system. Keep what we've got. Keep what we've got. Don't mess with it. But allow the judges who preside over these matters a discretion. Say to them, where there is unfairness, not in every matter, but where there is unfairness, the bench, the judges will have a discretion to enter the fray and say, right, I think this result is unfair. I'm now going to assist you in reaching a fair division of assets and the question of maintenance.
And be sensitive to the parties' needs.
Be sensitive to the parties' needs, absolutely.
Gender is an issue.
Gender is an issue. It's an issue worldwide.
Thank you so much. Fascinating topic. Wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure.